Hello, welcome to this presentation about Brazil, macroeconomic facts and outlook. I'm Anthony P. Müller. Brazil is the largest country in the so-called Western Hemisphere. It is about the size of continental USA without Alaska and has a population of 210 million people. Recently, it has been a leading member of the BRICS group, and the shift has been going on from a closer relationship commercially, politically, with China and other BRICS countries at the cost of the US influence. As the biggest country in South America, as an important producer of agricultural products and of raw materials, Brazil is of high importance also for the US and for Europe particularly, besides its integration into the BRICS, which will be even more important when these BRICS countries will establish common payments systems. So here we concentrate on the macroeconomics of Brazil in a perspective of Austrian economics, where we are able to highlight certain deficiencies from which this country suffers. Look at the basic indicators and begin with the currency, the Brazilian real. The Brazilian real is in a long-term trend of losing value compared to the US dollar. However, as one can see, there are important and long and big swings in this path, and recently the trend towards the general tendency of devaluation has increased. So we will count with a further weakening of the Brazilian currency. It is, so to speak, on its way back to its long-term weakening trend, and the current fiscal situation and monetary situation does not call for a sharp change in the trend to becoming weaker. However, there seems to be no major risk of default or any other severe external crisis, given that the foreign exchange reserves are substantial. And however, there has been a strong move to stabilize the currency recently. As you can see here, the overall exchange reserves are still at this impressive level of 38 billion US dollars. The permanent weakness of the Brazilian economy shows up in the annual growth of its gross domestic product. As you can see, first of all, there are high volatility in the growth rate, and secondly, if you look at the long-term trend, it should be lower actually. Yes, it is too weak to move forward towards a high-income country, compared, for example, at growth rates of China. The Brazilian growth rates in the long term are laughable with a range of below 4% more or less. That is just too weak to gain pronounced improvement of the country's situation in terms of living standards. So weak growth seems to be a permanent feature of the Brazilian economy, along with high volatility of the growth rate. So gross fixed capital formation is way in percent of GDP, is way too small in this range here of about 18%. This is just not enough. It should be up to maybe 30% or even more. So you can say it should double to have a future of high growth and development. And this low gross fixed capital formation is the result of a too low gross domestic savings. In part, this results that the population in general is still poor, that the businesses get taxed too much, cannot save and finance properly their own investment, and the huge part of the savings of the private sector is absorbed by the government in terms of public net negative savings. So it has fallen drastically here since 2010 and has somewhat recovered, but it's way too low. So we have here a basic weak point of the Brazilian economy, and this situation shows up. Low capital formation, low savings, high government sector, shows up in low productivity. The productivity is not rising. Actually, it has been falling since 2010, the rate. So we have no productivity increases. There's fallen drastically from around 212. And then the crisis of 2020. It has recovered, but it is still below the peak of 2008 and 2010. And in general, so we have had, one can say since the data here shows up, since the early 2000s, no productivity increases. So this is the basic situation, and it explains why Brazil does not grow as it should to move ahead. So let's look at the monetary situation. Here we have the central bank balance sheet. So we can hear that about 2006, 2008 in the crisis, this started a change of trend, and it's a steep increase, but this has been stopped around 2018-19. So there is no longer a massive increase of liquidity coming from the central bank. So this is an important sign that maybe the inflation rate will come under control and not explode furthermore. So when we look at the money supply, however, it is still very steep. So we have actually these trends, one trend, second trend, and this third trend, which is still going on. So the government must react, in this case the central bank, which is not fully independent, but largely, and consequently the monetary authorities have set the policy rate of interest, so-called Selic rate, higher since 2021, and also recently have reacted to the situation after there's been a long-term trend downward of the interest rate. So we have since late 2020 this new upward trend, and we will have to see how it will be, how it is manageable, that the central bank is strong enough to curb the expansion of the money supply M2. Obviously, it has already done so by breaking the trend towards higher balance sheet expansion. So we see here the recent developments, a sharp rise in face of rising inflation rate, then the plateau, then it moved down again, and recently the central bank moved up again. And this reflects the tendency of the central bank to curb the Brazilian inflation rate. And you can see also here a high volatility. Yeah, but one can say the central bank always, when it's getting above 10%, or here 11-12%, that it tries to curb and bring the rate down again. But here we see this recent trend upward of the inflation rate. Here are the recent situation. So we have last year this downward trend towards May, April this year, and since then we have this upward trend again, to which the central bank is reacting right now. So we cannot be fully confident, but at least the intention is visible. So the big problem of Brazil, of course, it is the government sector, way too huge, and a massive bureaucracy, legal uncertainty, a lot of false expenditure. They go into social services, and they come at the lack of building up a strong infrastructure. I see no way how this could change. It is inherent in the political system. The government is too much centralized. The states, individual states, have not many rights, and the communities, the municipalities, also less so. So it's over-centralized, over-bureaucratized, and over-regulamentized. The public debt in percent, which is an indicator of the fiscal situation, it has had this immense rise at the crisis of 2010-11, still visible, with its immense increase of the public debt, and since then the tendency to curb it, but it looks as if in the recent year, the definite number for 2025 are not yet here, it is on the rise again. And when we have numbers of more than 90%, it is usually very hard to bring the debt under control. One needs radical measures. One needs actually measures of the kind as currently Milei is doing in Argentina. But it looks like as if Brazil is not ready for such a strong cure. Unfortunately, so it seems, things have to get worse. And maybe the example of Argentina, when there is a visible success, also in the coming years, change may happen. Political potential is present. There's a strong libertarian movement. There's a strong conservative movement. And there are chances that they can gain the next elections. So the government budget, of course, the balance is negative, and so we have a constant accumulation of debt. So the fiscal deficit is a major problem, although the taxation is high and the expenditures are false, so to speak. They go into the wrong areas. Yeah, and the deficit is obvious because the expenditures do not lead to higher growth in the future. Social expenditures have a different effect than expenditures in the infrastructure. That's really the big problem. The country is actually way too large for a centralized government. If you think about that, it should be more federalist, or as some even say, it should split up into various areas. The Constitution prohibits any movement that pleads for a splitting up of the country. So also interesting. But at least strong federalism should come to solve the problem. So we have huge reforms necessary, not just simple reforms. Now let's close. Look at the external sector. So even it has a mega sector of agriculture, and worldwide, the demand for Brazilian agricultural products is high. With few exceptions, Brazil has a negative current account in terms of its GDP. And this, of course, is an unstable situation. It explains the weakness of the currency. And it is a huge importer of high-tech goods, of basic goods from China, and the only strong export sector is basically its agriculture, particularly with deliveries to China, and its raw materials. So the external debt has risen drastically since 2005, but it has been stabilized since 2012, 2013, and in terms of GDP, it is under control. It has fallen down radically, had a long stabilized tendency. Recently it's going down again. So we see no immediate external threat, giving the high exchange reserves and the present tendency of the Brazilian central bank to curb inflation. The other main problem is, and this is the basic problem, too low an savings rate, too low capital formation, high bureaucracy, predominant state dominance, and over-bureaucratization and a unreliable legal system. So we largely agree with the sovereign risks analysis from the various rating agencies. So we see a stable outlook. I would not say that the rating has a positive outlook as Moody's, for example, does pronounce. We expect a change only with the next government that could be a more libertarian, a more business-friendly, a more conservative leaning. So if you like more information, just write me an email, apmsovereignriskanalysis@gmail.com. I'm ready to have online consulting with Zoom. So thank you very much. And here are some additional. So here are some basic background references. 3 articles of mine. The Ghost That Haunts Brazil, which tries to capture the, let's say, the mentality of the Brazilian state, of the Brazilian government. The positivist of philosopher Comte, mega influence on the overall thinking. And then you have the second element that I diagnose, the practice of vulgar Keynesianism that is rampant in Brazil. And finally, that the country is trapped in the middle income trap, and how it could possibly escape. To close, here are the data sources. So for the statistics, it's trading economics, the country page Brazil, and for world data, here you can find all other major data beyond macroeconomics. So thank you very much. For any more question, just contact me, apm.sovereignriskanalysis@gmail. Thank you.